All right, so I'll take over for kind of continuing the theme of frost. And so I just wanted to mention that honestly, the main reason why all this frost review came up this year was we got some feedback from media back in the spring that there were some times where we issued a frost advisory where the point and click showed temperatures even 40 or above. And so we got some questions about that. So we just wanted to do a quick review on, the impacts of frost, what it takes for it to develop and, have local criteria here for us to issue advisories. Try and make it a little more objective rather than subjective. So I'm mostly going to focus on the forecasting the frost and advisories, and I'll put in a few other notes as well. So we did end our growing season officially 2 days ago. So we won't have any more frostFreezeProgramReviewProducts or frosting the grids until the spring. And like Mark showed, our median date for the last spring freeze is March 21st. So frostFreezeProducts will start up somewhere around that date. If it varies, I'll let you know. We'll coordinate with our neighboring offices, but March 21st is, I think we started earlier than that the last 2 or 3 years, but we'll see what happens in 2021. So this is, some of this will look familiar from the email I sent out a few weeks ago, but here's the criteria for a frost advisory. Straight from the directives, again, minimum temperatures between 33 and 36, and good radiational cooling. You need that inversion to set up so that the ground temps can get below freezing. I just want to touch base a little bit on this last bullet, the elevated RH from 70 to 75. When I was doing the literature review myself for, coming up with frost forecasting, the directives don't explicitly mention relative humidity. And a lot of the papers I came across, they talked a lot about how like freeze damage can occur even when those first two bullets, come true, but yet you have dry RH. All you need is that, below freezing temperatures on the ground, and you can get freeze damage in your crops. And so a lot of the agricultural community uses frost to describe whether, conditions, whether you have actual frosts on the ground or not. They called it, hoar frost is when you have meteorological frost, you got, ice crystals that develop. But then you have black frost where freeze damage happens in plants, you get blackening of leaves, and, it's called black frost, but yet you don't actually get frost on surfaces. So I had a question as to whether or not we needed to consider relative humidity to do the frost advisory. If you can have damage without that high RH. So Jordan and I spoke with John Kosh and John Guiney at Eastern Region because I wanted to clarify on the purpose of the frost advisory. Is it for actual frost? Is it for plant or crop damage? Why are we doing this? And so their take is, as of now, the purpose of the frost advisory is for actual frost, actual ice crystals developing on surfaces, cars, roofs, plants, whatever. And so we do need to take the RH into account. And I'll actually talk more about Eastern Region feedback towards the end, but I just wanted to touch base on that because I did have questions because it was mentioned a lot that as long as those first two bullets come true, you might be able to get freeze damage on your crops regardless of the humidity. But
Vicky, I have a question. Elevated RH, does that mean just increased value, or does it mean above the surface, like Mark had mentioned, the canopy?
Probably just bad wording on my part. No, it just means high RH, above 70%.
Okay.
So no, not above the surface, just our forecast has to be above 70%. So, and again, we want this criteria to be across, preferably like more than half a zone, in order to issue the frost advisory. And so to issue the frost advisory, you want widespread or areas of frost across the zone. Using those, the previous slide. If you got your temps between like 37, 38, you can put patchy frost in your weather grids, but you probably don't want to issue an advisory. It's probably not going to be, impactful enough for a frost advisory. And of course, right now, temps above 38, no frost in the weather grid or frost advisory. But, give or take a degree or two, patchy frost in the grids, may be helpful. But again, no advisory above 36 degrees, at least per the directives. So we'll see if that changes in the future. And this is, just standard freeze watcher warning. Forecast has to be 32 or less. And if you also expect frost, the humidity above 70%, put frost in your weather grids and then mention it within the text of the freeze warning, because they're not going to have a frost advisory and a freeze warning out at the same time. So just mention it in your text. And of course, frost and freeze use HAZSIMP NPWs, the new what, where, when impacts format. And of course, you want to issue this as early as possible. Ideally 12 to 24 hours. You want to give our partners, some time to prepare, bring their plants inside, cover their crops, things like that. So you don't want to be issuing it, 6, 9 o'clock at night, and there's no time for anyone to use the information essentially. So if you got the confidence, issue it as early as possible. And so Mark covered a lot of the lit review side, but I just wanted to add a couple of notes that I had written down during my research. And so in the United States, there are more economic losses of crops to frost damage than any other weather. Hail, hurricanes, frost definitely causes the most each year. And as was mentioned, moist soil stores more heat, so it has a less chance of being damaged than loose dry soil. And so I think sandy soil is one of the most susceptible. And then of course, just because there's frost on the ground doesn't mean the plants are going to die. And so the only thing frost says is that there's freezing temperature and ice form, but it may not have gotten cold enough for that particular plant. It may be protected somehow. So just because there's frost on something, on a plant or a crop, doesn't mean that it's been damaged. Just wanted to throw that out there. So I want to show you a few smart tools that we have at our disposal to help with the forecasting frost and making decision on issuing the advisories and even freeze warnings. So one of the tools is Tim's radiational cooling tool. You use it on your minimum temperature grids when you got a good radiational cooling night, and it lowers your temperatures for known cold spots. Holly Shelter, Bladen County, spots like that. And the number on the tool, from 1 to 6 is purely subjective. If you've got clear, dry, no winds, slide the bar a little to the left for, enhanced radiational cooling. You get some cirrus clouds or, some light winds, slide it to the right for, less cooling. But it'll definitely help you highlight those spots, because I do know there's some partners that, especially in those areas, that will take out temperature forecast and then drop it a few degrees because they know that it cools more readily where they are. So next one is Matt's frost tool. So this tool is very good for adding frost to your weather grids based on your temperature and wind, as well as sky and RH. So the screenshot here shows the default for patchy areas and widespread. Of course, you can adjust any of these based on, your preference or, the situation for the night. But of course, there's limits to all of them. I definitely don't recommend dropping that RH below 70% for frost. But yeah, you got some room here to adjust, especially for the areas and widespread if you want to add some frost to your weather. And these are currently off on GFE because we've passed the date, but they'll pop back up in the spring. We'll have the frost freeze threat grids. The frost threat appears using the defaults shown in the frost tool from the previous slide, and then the freeze threat shows up whenever we have the hourly temperatures below 32 degrees. So these are also good to, keep an eye on just for a quick glance if you're expecting frost or freeze in the near future. It's a good go-to. And the last tool I wanted to mention was probability of exceedance, which Reed actually used during one of our last frost freeze events. So I've used it myself for a couple of times, even for just something random as like chance of the temps going above 50 degrees yesterday or something. It's pretty cool to check it out. So under the weather element group hazards, you just create a scratch grid for whatever time frame you want, and then run the smart tool to see, the probability of temps going, meeting a certain threshold, or even dew points or wind, and it looks through all the guidance in GFE and gives you some values. So it's very cool for highlighting, areas that you might want to issue a product for, or, if you're on the fence, yeah, it's definitely a good tool in your tool belt. So next thing I just wanted to quickly mention is a few feedback I've gotten from partners regarding frost and freeze. Haven't gotten as much feedback back as I wanted, and I just realized I spelled it feedback. And so what limited feedback I got, I just want to share it with you guys. So hopefully I can get more feedback from our agricultural partners. Unfortunately, emails I sent out didn't really get much response, but the few that I did get was positive. They definitely use our frost and freeze forecasts and products to make decisions to protect their plants and crops. And one person noted that if the frost is thick and heavy enough on their covers, it still damaged their strawberries. And so they take it very, they certainly use our forecast. So it's good to know that, what you're doing has purpose for sure. And then I asked a few of our media partners about frost and freeze, and both Gannon and Jamie said that they definitely use our frost advisories. They take time to highlight it, try to pinpoint areas that need protection. And then Jamie did mention that it does carry more weight in the spring than fall. Fall things are already, being cultivated or kind of over. So, but the springtime is when you got anything that's early blooming, you want to protect that. But they both definitely use our products. They both pay attention, and so it's good to know. So the last thing I wanted to bring up was talks that came up during when Jordan and I talked to John Kosh and John Guiney about the future of frost and freeze for the National Weather Service, because it's definitely, good to know. But so most of you probably know that until the late 1980s, the National Weather Service provided fruit frost forecasts to sensitive crop regions in the U.S. But it was argued that this service infringed into the private sector, so the program was disbanded. That way, the local farms or agricultural community can hire private meteorologists to do this forecast for them. So while we still provide frost and freeze products, it's not explicitly aimed at their agricultural community. Like, we're gearing towards them, but it's not explicitly aimed at them. Rather, we're issuing it for the public in general in mind. That's the official standpoint, to not infringe upon, private sector or like overstepping out bounds kind of thing. So it's mostly public products. But yeah, when we talked with Eastern Region, there is chatter around the National Weather Service about, either we need to define our purpose more, what this program does more clearly, or we need to stop doing it completely. And so questions that have come up is like, should we be doing it? Is it a primary role? And so there's a lot of chatter, I think, especially like in Maine, why are we doing this? And then if we should be doing this, we need to, define it more clearly. So currently heat is the primary focus for fiscal year 21. So their thoughts are that cold might be maybe the focus for 2022. So hopefully it'll come back up again, you know, refining the frost and freeze program or getting rid of it completely. Not sure, but there is a survey. I'm not sure if you've seen it going around. That's available for the next 2 weeks for partners, you know, meteorologists, anyone that wants to give feedback on frost freeze products and, you know, the purpose of them. So there's a link on this presentation, or if anyone wants it, just to, you know, answer it. I think Charleston also has it headlined on their webpage, but there is, headquarters is starting to get feedback on these products and see where we go from here. But there may be changes coming up in the next few years regarding our frost freeze purpose. So, any questions?
Yeah, Vicky, this is Matt. I just want to say thanks for at least to some degree taking this a step further in contacting region. I don't know what other people think, but some of that information is definitely new to me. I'm glad I heard like about our intended audience. I did not know that I don't know if it's changed over time or if it was kind of always that way for several years, but that's definitely good good information to know. And then also thanks for bringing up that radiational cooling tool. I think that's the biggest plus we have in the office in terms of really capturing those cold nights. And that's a big benefit when we get these kind of situations. So thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it was nice doing all this researching, gathering all the information, because it was kind of all over the place. But it was a really good talk that we had with the Eastern region, because they definitely enlightened us to. And I found it surprising that it's under the public weather program, not winter program. But
hey, Vicky, this is Carl.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's probably a question for you, Matt. When using the radiational cooling tool on the Min-T temperature grid, to incorporate that into the hourly temperatures, don't you need to follow up by running a procedure on the hourlies using the maybe the F table or something like that?
Yeah, you could run a diurnal off the Climo, the F table. You could also copy that Min-T grid into like your 12Z grid or something, and then interpolate from 6Z to 12Z. And a lot of situations like this, I've even noticed this bias of myself. Just too warm in the evening. Like a lot of these nights, the temperature really tanks early, and loading any kind of guidance, whatever it is, we're always way too warm around 10 p.m. midnight. It tends to cool off really fast in the evening, then a lot of times even level off. So a diurnal might not even cut it in situations like that. You might have to just kind of work off that Min-T grid, like I said, maybe copy it into your hourlies and then kind of shift it around. And this is actually something, I know we're kind of branching out. This is one of my concerns of going over the MBM with some of this stuff, where I mean, in every situation I've worked with frost freeze, it just kind of washes out these details, and we're going to be missing a lot of frost and freeze events if we're just loading that in. So take advantage of this tool that Tim and you put together. I mean, with this radiational cooling, it really helps hit those cold spots that no piece of guidance, not even a contour, pretty much nothing else can capture. So
yeah, I just wanted to make sure people knew that it wasn't just as simple as running the tool on the Min-T grid. You had to follow up to incorporate that steeper cool down into your hourlies.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah.
One thing you'll find out is the humidity, the RH values are really key on how the temperatures drop. Because if you look at places like out in Arizona or some desert areas where the RHs are extremely low, you'll see that quick drop off that Matt was talking about. But our diurnal tool probably is really focused closer to a marine, which the values would not drop off as quick. So that may be one of the things you're seeing there, Matt.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the situation. And I'm going to write down, Carl, though, I'm going to look into seeing if that tool can simply also run on the hourly temperatures as well, because it'd be good if it worked for both. But that's a good point to bring up. So.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
All right, yeah, and I know Tim's gonna he has on his to-do list to edit the radiation cooling tool with the latest satellite data. He developed that years ago using when satellite data was a lot more coarse. So next time we have a really good radiation cooling night, he wants to, yeah, see if he can tweak that a bit. But any other questions?
Does Doug, do you have a question or anything? You can put it in chat.
I just had a quick comment, and that I think Reed's point in the middle of the presentation is really important about the RH on the canopy versus what we're forecasting. And it's just, I don't know if I have the right answer for it. I think it's just something to consider, that I would bet you that, typically the RHs are probably much higher on these, frost concern nights than what we're thinking they're going to be, especially at the ASOS station. So just something to consider. I know that, when we had the event in early November, I was messing with it. I think I had to bring it down to about 70% from 75 to get to show what I wanted. But, it could have been because my dew points weren't great. But regardless, I think Reed brought up a really good point. And with that, I need to go to appropriations law. So great job, Vicki and everybody. And I wish I could be in this winter workshop for the rest of the day, but I gotta shift over to another course. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark.